Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hi, I'm Denise.
And hi, I'm Jessie. And you're listening to Your Therapist is Not Okay, Part 2.
Today we are following up with our discussion with our producer Denise about talking about her experience having come here through Zimbabwe, South Africa, Nigeria, and then to Canada. And this episode is going to focus a little bit more on mental health aspects and on how therapists can maybe show up in a way that is helpful and supportive.
One of the great things that we got to talk about last episode, which went pretty deep, was on how when we're constantly juggling cultures, it means that there's fragmented parts of ourselves that don't get to be full and seen. One thing that Denise, you kept bringing up was this aspect of all roads lead to loneliness when you experience that. How can I be fully seen when I'm speaking maybe English as a second language and I don't get to be as funny? How do I show up when I know who I am in one culture, but that's not what this culture allows?
Mm.
And I think that is a really important avenue for discussion that so many people are experiencing, and so rarely do we get to talk about it. So thank you for that vulnerability. And today, we really want to actually ask you as a client how we can actually work together in kind of a dialogue to be able to really meet people in that kind of crossroads that they find themselves in.
Yeah,
Mm.
thank you for having me again, Jessie and Ryan. So first things first, I would say curiosity. Curiosity is the place where I think a lot of healing is found. And actually, you guys both spoke about this quite extensively in our relationship episodes, conflict episodes, where you spoke about meeting. I think it was one of the tips you gave. Actually, you said it in a much better way than I'm about to say it, about meeting your partner with curiosity. So if they're angry,
Mm.
if they're upset, like instead of you getting angry and being like, why are you angry? Now I'm angry because you're angry, being like, no, actually, I want to understand, like, why, what about this makes you tick? What about this is
Mm.
setting you off? Like, how can I meet you right now? And how can I best meet your needs right now that you feel are not being met, right? So curiosity is what I would say is 100% the most important thing. And I'll say in that, if you're working with African immigrants, not assuming their identity is the same as Black Canadians. And I'm saying that like that because there's a difference between being a Black Canadian whose family has been here for like decades or centuries versus being an African Canadian or just being an immigrant in Canada who's African, right? Our identities are very different.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that now because when we spoke about the Juneteenth thing, it was me
Mm.
saying like I have come to understand more and more as time has gone on and me living here that like as much as I am black, I'm also African, and that adds a different level of nuance, right? We share a lot of commonalities amongst ourselves as black people, and I'm speaking about the black diaspora across the globe. But at the same time, the differences between what a black Canadian would have experienced and how they navigate the world as an African would, as an African immigrant who just landed here would experience and how they would navigate the world and how they see themselves and everything. So just not assuming, just understanding that it's
Mm.
much, much more complex, which is why I say again, this time all roads don't lead to loneliness, but curiosity. Just being curious to say, hey, tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love that kind of nuance that even if we have somebody in our office that might even be from the same continent, same country within that continent, it does not mean that we get to make assumptions. And it does not mean that just because one thing worked, another thing's going to, or we can meet them in that.
Hmm.
Curiosity allows us to constantly wonder, what are you bringing and who are you?
Yes.
Mhm.
And how can I meet you in that?
Yes.
And it's so less top down. It's
Mhm.
almost like an exploration together. And I really value saying that.
Yes, 100%. I love that, Jesse, that you said an exploration together, because that's what it is. Because on one hand, your client is exploring whatever trauma they have to be like whatever roads they need to explore to be able to heal whatever traumas they have. On the other hand, you're supporting them through that, right? and you're
Yeah.
seeking to understand them better, to understand their cultural context and whatever other context that they may be bringing in better, um, so you can best accompany them on that road
Mm,
effectively. Yeah.
yeah. So, and I guess I really hear from that that one of the biggest ways that traditional therapy or a white therapist or even just a westernized therapist might miss the mark with clients, whether they're black, people of color, immigrants, have been here for a long time, whatever the case is making those assumptions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Curious if there are other ways that you frequently notice folks kind of miss the mark.
Um, I would say again, guys, this time, honestly, all roads lead to curiosity. That assumptions are a big thing, right? And
Hmm.
to be fair, I understand that some assumptions they don't just pop out of thin air. They come from years of consuming Hollywood propaganda without you realizing there's propaganda. Where, for example, we see every scene that is shot in Mexico or what's supposed to be Mexico is got this weird yellow filter or tint on it, and we're like, what? What on earth is going on? So I
We live in
understand.
sepia tone.
Exactly. Um, so I understand where they come from, but like seeking to deconstruct that, like where is this coming from?
Mm,
And to kind of go back to what I spoke about in the previous episode, like when
mm,
it comes to speaking with people who are either white South Africans or who have spoken with white South Africans, they now speak about how things have become so unsafe in South Africa. Like I understand why they would say that as much as, and this is me giving them grace. I understand why they would say that, but not just stopping there, but then seeking to learn more, right? Okay, what's happening beyond looking beyond the voices that look like or sound like mine, right? To say, oh,
Mm.
wait, whenever I hear about South Africa becoming unsafe, it's people who look like me, like as a white South African or someone who's heard from white South Africans, right? Like a white Canadian. Realizing that, like understanding and seeing that pattern, like, oh, snap. But then when I speak to a black South African, they're not as forthcoming about like things having become unsafe in the same way. What is going on there? Like, there is where the curiosity starts to lead to healing in terms of you then doing your research, talking to other Black South Africans, saying, hey,
Mm.
this is what I've heard. This is what I've seen. Like, excuse my ignorance, but like, could you please explain this to me? Maybe not necessarily speaking to them all the time, because also I have to say that sometimes it can be very laborious to have to explain constantly to people. So doing
Absolutely.
your research, and I mean actual research, guys, I have to put in that disclaimer because nowadays we have people creating history, um, and it's crazy. And I'm saying creating history as in they're seeking to skew things and say no, white South Africans were there before the Bantu speaking South Africans, which is bizarre. Um, and yeah, so my point is like seeking to learn and understand to say, hey, this is what I've been taught, this is what I've learned. What exactly, how true is that, right? Not just
Mhm.
running with assumptions and seeking to learn. So yeah, all roads again lead to curiosity.
I'm thinking also about how therapists can make room for these experiences, especially if they haven't lived through them themselves.
Hmm.
And there's an adage in therapy that it's actually way harder when you do relate really well to someone versus when you don't. You make a
Interesting.
lot more assumptions. But I'm thinking about what you're talking about in curiosity. If you're really curious about someone, when they're talking, you're not actually thinking about your next question.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
You're actually thinking about what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to use South Africa as an example because it's so perfect. If somebody's saying something about their experience and you go in with, well, I've heard it's unsafe, you haven't listened to them at all. It's actually within like the mental health therapy space, they didn't say anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
mm,
How do you actually be with them and what they're talking about? Who cares about what your assumptions might be? This is actually your chance to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the greatest ways of learning within curiosity, as you're saying, Denise, is to put yourself aside
Mm-hmm.
because the expert's talking and we get to learn. And I could imagine if more therapists did that and more people in general, you'd actually feel a lot more seen,
Mm-hmm.
a
100%.
lot more kind of understood because when we're talking, it is about us when it's our own experience. We are the expert of our own experience. We
Mm-hmm.
do know more than
Mm-hmm.
someone who hasn't been there or
Mm,
listened or maybe just consumed media.
mhm.
And so I was just thinking about that in terms of like, how do we make room for this?
Mm.
Yeah.
That might be one of the ways.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I want to throw this question back to you guys a little bit. I know that last week when we were talking about this episode, Jesse, you let me know that you had read Americana by Chimamanda Adichie, who's a Nigerian author. I love her, love, love, love her. Um, so I want to know, like, outside of the therapy room, what work do you guys do on a daily basis to try and understand your clients better, to understand them
Mm.
more outside of reading, or even just in reading? Like, how has that helped you? And I say that because I think the best therapists are not necessarily formed directly in the therapy room because they're asking the best questions or they're sitting the most therapy like.
Mm.
But the therapists who, like you've said in different ways many times, who seek to do the work outside of the therapy room, whether it's them exploring their own shadow self or them seeking to decolonize therapy and in order to understand their POC clients better or whatever. So yeah, how do you guys
Mm.
seek to learn?
I think I'll take that one for a second. And then, because Ryan also does this, but one of the hardest things you can do as a therapist is make your client explain their
Mm,
identity to you.
mhm,
If a client spends so long trying to be understood by the basics of what they understand about themselves, you're not doing therapy.
mm,
You're just like your curiosity is actually getting in your way.
yes.
So I think for myself, being able to actually read Black authors, for sure, but also not just like the psychology books, but like what are people interested in and consuming?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Oddly enough, social media can be really cool.
100%.
If I look at my algorithm now, there's a wide variety of people who are telling
Mm-hmm.
me things from their POV.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really cool chance for me just to get, even if it's a soundbite, culture, understanding that isn't just my own. I find
Mm.
it's so easy and it sounds so pretty, so to speak, to sing in my own of what I know, of what I believe. I actually have been really interested right now in the cacophony of a bunch of voices that I wouldn't just necessarily get to see on a day to day. I'm really
Mm.
curious, even if the opinion doesn't necessarily jive with what I've come to understand for my own life. And I think when it comes to Black authors, Black creators, Black influencers, and a wide variety of cuisine or food or how people
Mm-hmm.
cook, what does this look like in your culture? I find myself becoming a bigger person. And
Mm-hmm.
that bigger person is who I bring into the therapy space.
Love that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, listen is just kind of the main thing. And it's very similar to what you're saying, Jesse, because when I think about listening, it's listening to the people that we know, it's listening to the people that we encounter in the world, but it's also listening to social media, listening to books, like that someone has intentionally put their voice out there to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we also listen to that, often people are very eager to be heard. They've
Mm-hmm.
put a lot of effort into being heard. So
Mm-hmm.
just allowing their voice to be there, allowing us to absorb it.
Mm-hmm.
I do also think for me that there's an important balance as a therapist between um, cultural competence in terms of knowing things, knowing bits of information, and not being committed to them, so to speak, so that we are paying attention and consuming things and listening, but that we don't come in thinking like, oh, I know about Zimbabwe culture because I read a
Mm-hmm.
book.
Mm-hmm.
Allowing it to be different person to person. Just like as a parallel example, like as a non-binary person, I
Yes.
know that not everyone's experience of being that is going to be the same as mine, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even at all similar than mine.
Mm-hmm.
So I do try to share with folks if I have an understanding of the culture that they're coming from, is to say like, well, I do know some things and I work to try to be up to date, but I also want to hear what it's like uniquely for you.
Mm.
So what I
Uh,
really want to know
I
is like
like
what
that.
are the terms? What are the ways that folks talk about it generally? What are maybe like the main tenets of that culture in terms of like belief systems and history and stuff like that, so that I don't so that I'm not clueless and brand new when I'm invited into a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but that they can
yes.
also let me know what it was like for them to experience that culture that I have a little background knowledge in.
Like that. Yeah.
A really good way of saying that.
Yeah.
And that goes so, like, it goes to any community we're not a part of.
Mm,
Mhm.
Uh, a neat example that came to mind is I'm not Jewish. And so I had quite a bit of ignorance on Jewish holidays.
mm,
And I realized that's not okay.
Mm.
Uh, if someone says that they're going to something or that they have a mezuzah above their house, I want to know what that means.
mm,
It's not going to be fair for you to be like, huh? What's that? It's more therapeutic for
Mm.
me to be able to understand a cultural significance. And sometimes that is very particular. I might have somebody come into my office and I recognize my ignorance. What I'll clock is my ignorance. They
mm,
don't have to deal with that. That's on
mm,
me. That's my work. What I'll do is I'll meet them where they're at. I'll do my work behind the scenes. I'm not going to make assumptions, but at least I can have a window into something that we always have limits of competence. We
Mhm.
mm.
can't know everything. And to try
Definitely.
to actually create a certain level of white savior that I find really problematic.
Mm,
Because I
Mm.
don't want to swoop in and know everything and get
mhm,
that. But I also don't want to make it their problem.
mhm,
If I need to understand something about your world, I will do that work.
mm,
I may
Mhm.
not have known it in session to do that work because of my ignorance.
mm.
Being gentle with myself, curious with myself, and then curious about an experience can be quite helpful, actually, as a therapist, Denise, I think.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those answers because really, I think that's what it comes down to, doing the work as a therapist, right? And not making it your client's job to constantly being like, this is what xenophobia is in this African context. This is what this means. You know what I mean? So 50 minutes of the therapy session, 25 minutes of it is us being stuck on this one definition where I'm explaining to you as my therapist, like, this is what this means. Yeah, and I really appreciate that because I think that outside of therapy as a whole, like that's how we're able to better relate with each other. And I would also encourage anyone who's listening to this to watch shows and consume media that is created by people who look and sound different than we are, to watch
Mm.
queer shows written by queer folk, to watch shows written by Black people, to watch shows written by African people, to watch shows written by, and I don't mean, also disclaimer, I'm not saying that African and Black people are two different things. We are all Black. But yes, to watch different shows written by different people. And I say that because for me, I can say that I've come to understand or relate better with other cultures and communities by watching shows that were written by them, because then I get to have a more 360 view into how their lived experience.
Mm.
It's like, again, not saying that I applied that template to say, oh, every single Hispanic a person thinks like this, their tia is like this, their grandma is like this. No, but to say, okay, I can see where we have overlaps within Hispanic culture and like Black cultures or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, for me, I find shows to be very helpful for that. But whatever form of media you consume, maybe
Mm.
change the kind of voices you're listening to. But yeah, still consume it in whatever type of media you enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's great.
And the neat thing that that actually kind of resonates is I remember your face last week, Denise, when you found out I'd read the book that you really love.
Hmm.
And you're like, Shh, you read that? I was like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, it was excellent. It was such a fascinating like story of being in America and like how you might actually feel like you don't quite fit with African Americans, but then you go
Hmm.
back home and you don't quite fit. And just I think that aspect of like I didn't do that to do anything. I didn't do it to be like to learn so I can bond with somebody. But it's neat when you've done it be for yourself, for
Hmm.
fun, for entertainment, because it is. It's and then watching someone be like, "Oh, you get it." And that face
Hmm.
of being like that, or a show that you might have
Mhm.
consumed, and someone's
Yes.
like, "Oh, I love this show." And you say, "Oh my gosh, that one scene." You
Hmm.
get it. You get, and it's like so much more beyond I need to know you because you're a
Hmm.
specimen. You're this
Exactly.
person
Right.
dissecting. It's like,
Hmm.
no, I'm just welcomed into your world because I have a bigger mindset than what my own might say I have to have.
Exactly.
Means you have these shared points of reference that you can connect on
Exactly.
and relate about. Like that's very meaningful. I mean that's how pop culture works. That's how we exchange understanding with each other. So it was one of the ways at least.
Yeah.
We've mentioned kind of concepts of like white saviorism a couple times in the last several minutes, and I think one thing that can come with that sometimes is therapists, especially white therapists, coming in thinking like, "Oh, I'm here to help this underprivileged or under-resourced so and so."
Hmm.
What that sometimes ignores, what that it does ignore and doesn't give credence to is actually all the many strengths. And so we did
Mm.
also want to ask you if there are particular strengths you see in Black and other immigrant communities that maybe therapists don't think or talk about as often as they should.
Yeah, I would say community, the sense of community. I think that's one
Mm.
thing. I don't think, and I've really been like reckoning with this more and more, especially recently, the past few months, I can say the sense of community that I think all Black people share collectively. And I'm not saying it's perfect. We still have our fights and stuff amongst each other. We
Of
still
course.
have our points of like, okay, friction. Um, but I can say there's this sense of community where we just get each other, where we share a look across the table where it's like, okay, you know what I'm saying,
Mm.
you know what I'm referring to here, and it's not even like I said any words. But yeah, that sense of community, right? Whether it's in a humorous manner like I just shared, or in a more like I've got your back kind of way, and even on a more, I guess, molecular level, within our families, family systems, we're very, very, very communal. And I've seen that kind of shift with like the Gen Z or younger millennials generation. But I can say one thing that I can definitely give props to for the boomers, Generation X, and the generations before that is like how they are so community based. Like they will go to lengths to go and support their friend who's mourning, to go and support their family member who's in need in this one way or the other. They're very, very, very much community based. They care about their community so very deeply, sometimes to their own detriment, yes. Of course, it has its negative aspects, but I can say that that sense of community is unmatched. I can say it's definitely unmatched. And I envy that because as time has gone on, I'm seeing how it's getting eroded by the fact that we're getting so much busier and we take each other for granted because we think, oh, I follow her on Instagram. So I know what's happening in her life. It's like, no, you know
Yeah.
the highlight reel of what's happening in her life. You don't know that she's
Mhm.
actually struggling because she just lost her job. You're not to be
Yeah.
fair, yes, you're not able to fly to where she is to then support her or whatever. But then my point is just that sense of like, okay, I need to check up on this person. Like, for example, with my dad, I don't know how he's able to keep up with everyone in the family. Somehow he's able to do it. I'm in awe of it, and that's something that I see other people say. Yes, my parents are so good at like
Mhm.
nurturing community because at the end of the day, that's really what you have. And I think one thing I
Mm.
can draw a line, a thread between what I'm saying and what we were speaking about is realizing that the human experience is so much more colorful and so much more beautiful than our own like limited view of it, right? Of like
Yeah.
my day to day is I wake up, I go to the gym, I do this. Okay, your neighbor next door, like how are they doing? You know,
Mm.
how is their day going? What are they struggling with? You know, really being able to prop up each other and help each other in that sense. Because at the end of the day, like I said again, communities where healing is found, and where you get to experience humanity in a much, much more beautiful way that no one can teach you through mere words on a screen.
Mm.
We've spoken about this before, but this brings up this aspect that therapists can get really wrong.
Mm,
When we assume a white identity on a strength of a community
mm,
and say, you need boundaries or cut this person off, they're like problematic. And you're putting your own lens on something that actually is rich
mhm,
and nuanced and actually like problematic for you to say. I
Mhm.
like that a lot. That is something when you start to recognize that you are talking out of your own lens, your own Western lens, your own white Western lens, that it does miss the strengths that so many people bring.
mhm, 100%.
Yeah, I think being very conscious of when our solutions are very individualistic and that might not be a fit for folks with other cultural experiences. I think that's a great thing to highlight, Jesse.
Yeah.
I'm kind of noticing a bit of a foil between what you're talking about with the strength of community and what you've also shared about all roads leading to loneliness is that like one thing that you might not feel as much being in Canada is that present sense of community that's around you all the time. And so that
Yeah.
might really intensify those feelings of loneliness because it's like a loneliness, correct me if I'm wrong, but a loneliness for that community, not just for a specific person, although it could be
Yeah.
both.
Yes, I think it's both. I think it's for specific persons, like being my parents and my sisters. like
Of
watching
course.
them grow up because I'm the firstborn, so I have two younger sisters. Just watching them grow up and being
Mm.
like, "How are you my height already? You
Mm.
were a baby that I was
Yeah, yeah,
carrying
yeah.
in my arms yesterday, and now you're my height. It's crazy."
Mm.
So yeah, like certain persons, like I said, like my parents, my sisters, my grandmas as well. Um,
Mm.
so feeling like these are my anchor points and I'm untethered to them because I'm so far away from them. They're living
Mm,
in a different world from me. And I say that because they're living in a different time zone from me. By the time I'm
yeah.
waking up, they're in the middle of their day. So they're busy, 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 busy. I'm there slow and, just taking my time. And I'm there like, oh, I wish I could call them. And I can, but I wish I could call them and really, talk to them and have the same pace of life as they
Mm,
have. So there's definitely that. And of course, there's chosen family. And all of this, I don't want to underestimate the
yep.
the effects and the importance of chosen family. 100% that can and will prop us up. But at the end of the day, my point is community, right? That communal, that's importance that's placed on community, on forging that community and watering it and nurturing it and going to extreme lengths with disclaimer, not to extreme lengths, but going to extreme lengths to really just show people that you care about them, right? That's something that
Mhm.
you do not have the privilege to be able to do when you live far away from them. Because my extreme lengths would be I would need to pay for a $2,000, $3,000 ticket to be able to go home and say, I'm so sorry you lost your parents. I'm so sorry you lost your child. I'm so sorry.
Mm,
I'm not able to do that. Same way they cannot sit here and say, I'm so sorry you had a bad day at work. I'm so
yep.
sorry.
Mm.
Maybe I'm not say I'm so sorry, but I can just cook a meal for you so you know you're cared for and you have a warm place to
Mm.
lay your head at night, knowing that the person in the next room cares about you, what you've eaten, if you're warm, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's I guess
Okay.
a good way to round it off.
Yeah. All those holidays that you have to miss because do I get to celebrate here or do I spend all this money on a plane ticket?
Yes.
Every
Mhm.
holiday? I did last year. Do I do it this year? Can I? I don't know if I can afford it. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And that's a really cool way tying it back into like the therapy world of like being sensitive around that. Like if you have a client that is here, not from here, holidays probably are quite tricky.
Hmm.
And meeting that and maybe doing something that allows for celebration.
Hmm.
What would you want to do if we could celebrate anything, and allowing it to be something that's beautiful? It'll be a fraction of what your client might get to have, but then they get a memory that you were there for something for them.
Mm.
100%. 100%. And in some of the episodes we've had, we've spoken about how your therapist, of course, is there for you. Of course, they care very deeply for you, but they're not all, they cannot be everything for you in terms of the entire community that you need. Your one therapist cannot be that for you because of professional and other limits. But I think as therapists, I wish you guys could understand, and I think you kind of do, how important you are to immigrants, I can say, because that sense of community is there.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that your therapist is someone you're able to share with. Like I had a really hard day at work.
Mhm.
Things that you cannot share with your parents because, well, you don't want to bother them because, they think you're doing good, they think you're happy. But like,
Yes.
this is a place where
Mm.
you're able to sit down and say, I had a really hard day at work today. My manager said something racist to me, but I can't quit because I need this
Yes.
job and so on and so forth. You're really able to unload. So I just want to appreciate you guys for being that for people. Um, especially people who are in similar situations to me where they're far away from their families, because it is very much sometimes it's the only thing that gets us to be like, okay, I have someone who cares about me. I know Jesse's gonna be like, where's Tom? Because they haven't she hasn't heard from Tom in 6 years, not 6 years, sorry, in 6 months or whatever. And she's like, I hope he's okay. Even just having that
Mhm.
checkup and being able to send an update, say, Ryan, I passed like that exam, and having Ryan being like, I'm so happy for you. That in
Mhm.
itself is part, like you guys are part of our community in the
Yeah.
sense that we care about you, you care about us, you've provided listening ear for us. You're a place where we can, rest and relax our shoulders and exhale and be like, this is how I'm really doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
even the very work of
Absolutely.
therapy helps in that way.
being conscious of time, I'm so grateful for how much you've shared with us, and I'm aware that we could talk about this all day long, and still just be scratching the surface of what there is to talk about, of the complexity of the experience and the ways that we could show up and the ways that we missed the mark. But we've got to stop it there. But I just wanted to end with thank you so much, Denise. We're very grateful for you being willing to do this Q&A kind of style session and be so generous with your experience.
Thank you.
Yes. And for anyone listening, if there's anything else that this kind of resonated with in you and you want us to talk about it, let us know. And if you want that person that you can talk to, something that just came up for me as Denise was talking, if you feel like you can't bring it back home, because maybe you do have survivor's guilt, or your parents are so proud of you and you're doing well at school and you can't tell them that you may be feeling kind of a way. Yeah, we are here for you. We're here for you to bring anything. And without judgment, but also without any kind of need to know you're letting us down. So reach out today if you do want a therapist. At Centered Self, we do have people who would be happy to meet you in that.
Thank you. See you next time.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too, at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.